so ominous and terrifying. It is. It's airing live. It's July 5th, 2021. Can you guys believe it? Wow. I'm getting old fast. Sorry I couldn't do it last night, but I barely was able to do it today. I was working on some stuff, and technically yesterday was my son's birthday, but he actually had a friend who got married yesterday, so he had to go to the wedding, and so we couldn't do a birthday thing, so we're doing it tonight. But so that's why I'm streaming early in the day instead of at night. So it's just mass confusion, mass confusion as usual around here. But my son comes up to me and, we try to find out like you do, right? What do you want for your birthday kind of thing? And he's like, yeah, how about a commission, Dad? And I'm like, okay, what do you want? And he was trying to decide between Mysterio and Dr. Doom. And he wants me to do a Spider-Man cover recreation of Amazing Spider-Man 13 at some point. So he says, why don't we just do a Dr. Doom? And I said, what do you mean by we? No, I'm kidding. So I got that penciled and inked yesterday, and I got to get it colored and markered up today before he comes back at 3 o'clock for his birthday celebration. So that's what we're going to do today. Let's see who's here, shall we? Hyper Potato is here pushing Atari Force as usual. Leg Kick. And the great thing about Leg Kick is he's always here. He's always everywhere. We had a pretty good weekend, I think, all things considered. Let's see. Yes, he understands. Now, shockingly, Sequential Artist ordered 2 more books. I think he's up to 10 books now. So he's definitely the clubhouse leader. But I'm not going to get to those today. I got the commission to get done for my son. And then when that's done, I have to go clean the house. And then I have to get prepared for dinner and all those kind of good things. So, but maybe tomorrow I'll be back on to do your sketchbooks. So hang in there. From Vegas, aloha, Aaron. Happy 4th. Thank you very much. Spell my name correctly. It's Aaron. Come on now. Dr. Doom is awesome, and I think you'll dig what I'm going to show you here in a minute. Angelo's here. Excellent. Aaron Louvier is here. Mark Kessler is here. Good morning, Mark. Thanks for joining us. Hey, those of you who are waiting on art from me from Aaron Con, you're still going to be waiting. No, I am shipping out, not kidding, 5 to 6 packages of art every day. And it's like I look over and there's still a stack. So I'm doing the best I can, cutting cardboard and styrofoam, the packing material or foam board that I use to mail the stuff. So it's really secure because, quite frankly, I'm the best mailer in the business. And I want to make sure your art gets to you safely. It takes me almost 30 minutes just to package one piece of art. So it's a slower process. I have a stack over here going out later this afternoon, and I still have 4 or 5 pieces. I think the pieces that haven't gone out yet or haven't been packaged yet are Daredevil Yellow, which is going to France. So it's going to take 3 months to get there anyway. So Harley Quinn, Man Thing, and something else. So and Frankenstein and Mary Marvel. That sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. But considering how much I've mailed out, it's mind-numbing. I appreciate, believe me, I'm not complaining. Aaron Con was a fantastic hit, wonderful success, beautiful times. We all enjoyed it. We laughed, we cried. It moved me. So, but, and I'm very grateful for you guys and all the stuff you ordered, but I'm a one-man show here, so the packing doesn't get done as quickly as I'm sure you would like, but please be patient. You will get it. Okay. All right. So now, but because you guys are so loyal to the cause and show up whenever I show up, which is apparently random all the time now, I do have a regular show at 5:30 on Sundays, except of course last night. But I also make just crazy random appearances like this, for example. But because you guys have shown up, let me show you some cool stuff. Now, you guys have seen this, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's part of the process. This is out, and oh, it's not out, but it's available for pre-order right now through Amazon or through your local comic shop. This is published by Dark Horse. This is my trade paperback collection of Garbage Man from all of the DC material I did about 10 years ago. And there's new material in it, like 20 pages of new material with the debut of a new super team. So, and it's, in a way, it's ties in with the launch of the Lopresti verse here with my Empire Comics line with Wraith of God, which will be, excuse me, an Indiegogo crowdfunded project that's gonna, the intro page, the pre-launch page will be up. I doubt it's going to get up today, but it'll probably be up tomorrow. And so this is the cover to Wraith of God, which is a graphic novel. It's 72 pages right now, and it may expand a bit as well. But that's just one cover. Let me show you. Here it comes. Drum roll, please. This is the big debut. I decided to do, well, actually, I have a very big name person supposedly doing a alternate cover for me, and I'll show that when I have something to show. But I'm also doing another alternate cover that I'm doing, and this is what I call my retro 70s cover. Now, if you're a fan of Marvel Comics from the early 70s, whether you were there to read them or you're reading them in retrospect, you're going to dig this. So check this out. Premiere right here, right here, premiere right here. Check that out. That's the retro cover, the 70s retro cover, when Marvel used to do those kind of little box things where they would have the art in the box and then the rest of the cover was just color, in this case, white. I actually did the When Strikes the Wolf, that lettering I actually did on the artwork. The Wraith of God, of course, I dropped in. This other stuff I dropped in. But that's the second alternative cover. So that will be the retro alternative cover. It was designed to look like a Gil Kane cover from 1972, right, or 73. And so that's what I was going for. You'll notice the color is much more simple than what was done on the previous cover I showed you. That's more modern coloring. That's more contemporary than what you'd expect. This is more what you would have got in 1972 or 73, and that's kind of the whole idea. So to kind of bring back the nostalgia and retro. Well, sometimes that's the case, and sometimes not. I might, if I can think of something clever to put in there, I might put some word balloons in there, because that would be actually kind of cool now that you mention it, leg kicks. So I might do that. I might paste in some word balloons on there. Mike, what are you talking about? Bill Meacham. Now, Bill, have you not been tuning in? Wraith of God is, he's kind of a Batman of the Old West. This takes place in 1883, and he's a master of disguise and magic or illusion, I guess I should say. He's a monster hunter. This girl, the blonde, is his partner. His Alfred, I guess, would be probably a better way of putting it. And they hunt down monsters in the Old West. In this story arc, this initial story arc, they're hunting down some werewolves, but we don't really know who the werewolves are or the werewolf is, and so there's a mystery involved. There's lots of suspects. So it's a superhero monster Western. Just throw any genre you can in there, and it probably covers it. Well, wait a minute. Shouldn't there be some pointing toes in there? I think her boot toe is pointing, isn't it? Um, that's all right, Bill. I was just giving you a hard time. I appreciate you stopping in anytime. But there'll be more. There'll be more information available once I get the launch page up. Oh, I see. I see. I see what he's doing. This is Mike's attempting to be funny. Boo. So there you go. That's what you get for your effort. Okay. So anyway, this is kind of cool. I'm very excited. I just finished this weekend, and I'm just a big old Marvel fan from the well, just period. But I love those box frame covers that they used to do, and they only did them for about, I think, less than a year, like 9 to 12 issues. I think Submariner actually has the most of them, and I just thought, God, what a blast! So there you go. Yes, yeah, especially on this channel. I expect you guys, if you're going to drop some humor on me, it actually should be funny. You don't get A for effort around here. Well, the dress is actually, I mean, it's not 70s retro. That's, that's what they wore back in 1883. I actually did a little research. I know, I'm shocked. I know. Bill's getting caught up on his Marvel reading. See, now Boo. You guys are trying a little too hard to get knocked around in here. I'm going to have to make you maybe earn those a little bit. See, Paul recognizes it. See, he recognizes it. Thank you, Paul. Well, the one thing that Gil came when he was doing these covers is he always, because they had very little room to work with, right? So he always had like the foreground characters or something breaking out of the panel a little bit, but he always had to like get the heroes and whatever, kind of scrunched down, or which I kind of have the Wraith doing there, to fit into the box. And so that was all sort of the plan, to kind of get that feel. And of course the big girl in the foreground, looking menaced, that's very Gil Kane-ish as well. I didn't go in and swipe a cover or anything. I was just kind of trying to capture the mood of it, of how those books felt. So I don't know what they were called, but they had they had these big old bunched up stuff on their butts, which I didn't really show here because I didn't want it to confuse the size of her butt, but it would have been much bigger than what you're looking at. And so it's a little bit of a cheat, but the boots are accurate. The dress, the style of the dress is accurate. The only thing I kind of left off on this was all that bunched up stuff, so their butt looked like 10 times bigger than it actually was, because we would have lost her figure, and it would have got really kind of strange. You can guess that. Come on, man. Don't ask me questions like that. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it. Well, then she could probably make a dress like that. All right, so there's Paul getting a compliment also on the Savage Land Rogue sketch that I posted all over social media. So thank you guys. All right, let's so anyway, there'll be more of this. I'll be announcing this like crazy and posting about it and everything else. But there's your little preview that you get because you decided to tune in today. All right, let's speaking of werewolf, let's switch cameras to the gam cam, and you can see my werewolf-like limbs. Okay, so this is what I've done. This is an 11 by 17. So I can't really draw these on the live streams because it's just too hard to handle this size of art. But what I'm doing today is just going to marker it up and color it so that I think I can handle. See, there's a werewolf arm over there. It's not even a full moon. So this, of course, is harkening back to when Doom stole Surfer's powers back in FF 60 something, maybe. I don't know what the number was. But that's what we're going to tackle today. Alrighty, so I'm going to start on Doom's face. So let me move in a little bit here. There we go, so you can see what I'm. Oh, werewolf arm. All right, I can't guarantee that all of my pens are not dried up. Okay, now, anytime you make fun of art, that's quality. You're not going to get slapped down for that. You know, this is interesting. I used to when I was younger, a younger reader, and had all that shiny stuff. I thought that was really cool. In fact, I probably emulated it. But now I find it sort of kind of like I find airbrush art on the side of a van. I kind of find it dated. It doesn't really work for me. But that's not to mean that I'm not. I don't mean that to be disparaging to Bob Layton. I just it was a style that when I was younger I really kind of dug, and now I just kind of Bill, it may be actually the worst thing in the world when pens dry up. So let's see if this, I actually have another C0 waiting, if this one is going to fail me. Oh no, it's juiced up, so that's good. So I'm going to do an entire coverage of Doom's armor with this C0 to kind of wet the oh, and you guys may be interested in this. Sorry, hang on. Where is it? When this is the paper I use when this is the commission paper. This stuff is way more expensive than the blue ruled paper. This is the 500 series Bristol. It's acid free, semi-smooth surface. This is not lined, okay, and it has just a little bit of tooth to it, whereas the blue lined Strathmore comic book page paper I use the smooth, slick stuff, and because the ink for inking, this actually does a really nice job of both taking the marker and the colored pencils, which I use on these colored commissions, obviously, and so that's why I like to use it. Whereas the ruled paper, the smooth surface, it's great for inking, you know, and so that's why I get it for the for my comic book pages. Now, okay, I lied. Apparently, this is not juiced up. It's running dry on me right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cap this thing before I get too frustrated, because I don't think I have a C0 refill, and I really don't want to waste my time refilling on this live stream. So I'm going to crack open one of these brand new Copic markers that are thinner and carry less ink, but are just as expensive. And that was my shot at Copic. But this should be full since it hasn't been used yet. Let's So we'll just go ahead. You can see how much darker that is because it actually has ink in it. Imagine that. Now, hopefully this thing carries enough ink that I can get through this commission. Actually, it's not really, well, I guess it is a commission, just I'm not getting paid for it. It's a gift, but it still was a requested piece, so therefore that makes it a commission, I guess. It still doesn't feel like it's got a lot of ink in it. Everybody at the art supply store probably, you know, tested it out 100 times before I bought it, so there's like nothing left. Now, since Doom has, of course, stolen the Power Cosmic from the Surfer, his hands are going to be glowing with energy. I wonder if we can dump this light. I don't think we need that light. There we go. So I'm not going to color them gray. Okay, so theoretically I've just wetted the board. So now I can go in, let's say, with the C2. See what I can get accomplished here. I didn't put a lot of line work on this because I'm going to try and do most of the modeling with the markers and the colored pencils rather than going in heavy with the line work. I mean, there is some obviously indication of the shininess of Doom's armor, but you got to wonder, does he like shine his armor, do you think? Do you think he keeps it clean, or is it just going to be all like beat up and from battle scarred? I mean, is Doom like tidy, do you think? And he would like have to have his armor shiny, or do you think it makes him look cooler or tougher if it's all like beat to hell? An excellent question. I wonder if anybody's ever addressed that in a story. Doom's armor. See, today in contemporary comics, someone would do an entire issue about his butler cleaning his armor. I would just, you know, allude to it, you know, on a page or something and move on with the story. But that's just me. I'm the kind of guy who does retro Marvel covers, so. This is interesting. Do you like to leave your shadows to colors rather than inks? Not generally, no. I don't like to leave anything to the colorist because then you don't know what you're going to get. I have tried both approaches actually, where I've tried leaving stuff really open. Well, see, what happened was I can't even remember what I was working on, so this will keep me from throwing anybody particular under the bus. But I was working on something, and the colorist was misinterpreting the line work and the shadows I was putting in, or ignoring them, so that the color work didn't really match with what I had established for my shadow areas and such. So I started going really, really open and just letting the colorist do it. But then I wasn't really satisfied with how that looked either. So I started recently getting back into putting more solid black areas into the work. And the thing is, the solid blacks make the give the artwork more volume and more three-dimensional quality. So, you know, that's something you lose when you just do like a coloring book open type style. And generally it looks good, especially if you have a good colorist. But the black and white stuff looks a little flat. And so trying to get back to my roots, which of course would be, you know, my rights and roots, if you will. And I'm putting more blacks into the work itself. But I don't, but each commission, I generally sort of, you know, I kind of take each case separately, you know, make a decision about what I want to do. Like this, for example, a lot of times I'll do doom. I put doom and I put a bunch of black in here and then color around it. And I may still drop some black in here. Excuse me. But I wanted to start without it and get my values established. And then if I feel like, oh, you know what, I'll drop some, you know, some black in here. Then I'll just go ahead and do it over the top of the marker. And it's, it works really easily to put black over the top of this because it's still, you know, it's just marker over marker. So, and I don't have to worry about it bleeding on me because these, I don't know why a company would make markers that bleed each other. You know what I mean? I mean, I guess you do to a certain degree because you want to blend, but you don't want the black to blend. You want the black to be, or at least I don't. I would prefer the black to be permanent, more permanent, so that when I went over it with the other gray markers, it didn't bleed, but it does. So putting black in first is generally not a smart idea because it's going to bleed a little bit. See, right here I am blending these grays and complaining that the blacks bleed when they're basically the same thing. They're just a darker color. And I do want these to blend, so I just don't want the black to. Just give me a permanent black that doesn't blend. Now, also, the black pens I use to ink this, whether the Le Pen or the Microns, on a slick surface paper, they will bleed a little bit too. And this toothy paper, it's not real toothy, but it has a little bit of texture to it. It will, they will sink into that paper better, this type of paper, and so they're less likely to bleed. Whereas on the coated slick surface, that ink tends to sit on top of the paper and is just waiting for you to go across it and bleed for you and ruin your piece. So let's see. Yes, that's probably true. He would want to look good. It's stainless steel. There you go. Bill says he's not on Facebook much. My arm is better. It's still, I still have pain in certain ranges of motion. I'm still doing exercises and rehab for it. It's going to be a year before it's back to normal, which to me is just, I don't know, that seems like a long time, but I mean, that's just the reality of it. So I have to keep, and it's good enough now that I can use it pretty much without too much effort, but unless I want to, you know, anything below my shoulder is fine. If I have to raise my arm above my shoulder, it's still problematic. But so the most important thing is I got to remember to keep doing my exercises and not slack off, because I can use my arm now. So it's like, you don't think about that stuff as much until you try to do something like, lift something over your head and you're like, I can't do that. And then it reminds me, oh yeah, I better get back and do my exercises. So, but thank you for asking, Bill. I appreciate it. This seems like a well thought out answer here. Doom is a penultimate diva who has a serious problem with his disfigurement. Keeping his armor impeccable seems apropos. I think you may be right. You guys are making a great case for Doom having shiny armor. So Nighthawk Warrior says, awesome, Dr. Doom. Thank you, Nighthawk. I appreciate that. I wing this stuff so much, I don't really even think about what I'm doing, and that's where you get in trouble sometimes. But on the flip side, I've done, armor and stuff like that enough that I have a pretty good idea of what I can do and what I shouldn't do, which doesn't mean I always do what I should do, but I get taken less by surprise these days than by just doing something really dumb and go, oh, I didn't know it looked like that, or I wouldn't have done it. Whereas when I was younger, obviously I got myself in trouble a lot more often. But that's also how you learn, is, by making mistakes. But the problem is, it's kind of like when you're painting, you have a really nice drawing and then you go, okay, I'm going to paint this, and then you screw it up. And so you've like destroyed your drawing. Although smart people these days will do their drawing, print it out on a blue line on some watercolor paper or something, and then paint that. So if you do screw it up, you haven't destroyed your really nice drawing, and you can try again. Yeah, stay up there. You can start to see the challenges of working 11 by 17 on your lap. It's, so if all things go as planned, and when I start working on Wraith of God full-time in September, probably I probably won't be done with it, penciling and inking it, till sometime in January. Which then hopefully gets to the printer and gets shipped out in February. That would probably be the best case scenario. I haven't sat down and crunched the numbers, but so you have the Garbage Man trade that comes out in November. Then hopefully the Wraith of God will be out not too long after. And then we'll have two Lopresti verse books out at the same time, or not at the same time, but close together, and secrets will be revealed. How about that? Because like everybody else, well, I shouldn't say everybody else, but a lot of other people, I would like to do a connected universe. And I have more than just one or two characters that I want to try and do. And that's where it becomes problematic, because obviously, you know, unless you're, you know, Jack Kirby or something, you can't draw all the books yourself, you know. So, and if you get one that, you know, people really like and you want to do more of, it's kind of like, well, how do I launch these other titles and keep the regular titles coming out that people, you know, have grown accustomed to? Because I think there's a certain amount of curiosity where people will be like, yeah, let's see, you know, all 6 of your characters or all 8 of your characters or whatever. But, you know, ones are going to be more desirable to a greater number of people than other ones are. So I don't know. I've been toying around with the idea of doing sort of an anthology where you get maybe 4 stories, short stories of all different characters, you know, at the same time. And that way, you know, like Marvel used to do with Tales of Suspense, or, you know, Tales to Astonish, things like that. So I don't know. We'll see how it all develops. I want to get the cart in front of the horse, so to speak. But it is fun to think about that stuff, and hopefully it all will work. But I think the priority, the first thing to do is get something out there that has, you know, it's really good. There's a really good story, and that and that's why, even though Wraith of God is a Western, and you're kind of like, well, I shouldn't say it's a Western. It takes place during that period of time, but it's really not what I would call a Western in the purest sense. But I think that I've been working on the script for a long time, and it's, I mean, literally for years. I mean, not continuously, but it's been spread out over darn near 20 years. It gives you a lot of time to look at what you're doing and think about what you're doing and change stuff and make it better and all that kind of stuff, kind of like you would a screenplay or something. So I just think it's important that you launch with something really, really strong, regardless of the, you know, it's not a superhero book in the traditional sense. It is a superhero book, but not in the traditional sense, obviously. And, you know, so the first thing out of the gate is something that's really, really good. And then that kind of opens the door for you to explore other things. So we'll see. But that's my reasoning, insane or not. It's always a lot easier to launch a fully developed product than it is to to not, and then just wing it. Because then you're not sure that you're going to be putting out something that is as good as you hope it could be or should be. I'm using these darker pens here to sort of create the kind of effect I would have if I'd put in the black. I still might. I'm not committing one way or the other at this point. You can kind of see what I've got going on there. Yeah, that's the problem. There's a much bigger network that I'm involved with now to get the stuff out. Plus, I have a much bigger platform to get the news out on that stuff. So hopefully, this will be much more successful in that regard. It's the droning of my voice, I think, actually, Hybrid Potato, that sort of like makes them think that there's really nothing of significance going on in the live stream. That's it. Tales from Little Prestiverse, something like that. It's going to be color. It's going to be color, John. At least that's my plan. No, it will be color. If I don't make enough money, if I don't raise enough money to like pay myself, then the colorist and the letterer are the guys that get paid first. So the printer actually, and then the colorist and actually it would be the colorist and the letterer, and then the printer after that. So, and then everything beyond that will go to me. But this is not a campaign where I'm going to, well, if I don't make enough money, I'm going to cancel it. I'm doing it. I think it's important, especially in the way the comic book industry and market is evolving or devolving. Depends how you look at it. But I can't sit around and, put certain, financial goals as being the determining factor. Because I think that it's kind of a double-edged sword. You have to have product out there before you can get an audience. You can build a certain amount of an audience, doing stuff like this, but you have to have product out there so people can read it and say, "Oh, this is really good. This guy's good. I'm going to check out more of his stuff." Otherwise, you just end up talking about it all the time, and it doesn't really. Get you any place. So okay, so I think I'm going to do this in stages. I think I'm going to get Doom completely done, and then I'll worry about the Silver Surfer in the background. Okay, so that's pretty much the armor portion of our show. And I'm going to, I got to go in here with, like I said, his hands are going to be glowing, right? So I'm going to go in here with some warm grays on his hands and maybe carry it over a little bit into his wrists. Yeah, Bill had commented on when I was talking about painting earlier. I've ruined so many pics trying to paint them, man. Isn't that the truth? But the thing about painting is it always looks bad until it looks good. There's like this ugly period where you're just like, this is not going to work. And I think a lot of people abandon their paintings at that stage because they think I've ruined it. But there's this inescapable ugly period when you're laying down your values and your trying to get your shading and your color scheme and all this kind of stuff, where you're laying paint on and it's kind of blocking stuff in, and it looks kind of crappy. And but then you keep working it and it starts to come together, and so you have to kind of get past that stage where it's just like this. You lay down a few stripes of gray on here and you're like, I don't like the way that looks. Well, you keep working it and get it to the point where it's evolves into the illustration that you were hoping it would be. So you got to be patient. And watercolors, you can get to a point where you've overworked your watercolors. You can tell by looking at it that you've destroyed it. So that's one thing you have to sort of be careful about with watercolors, is not overwork them. And by that I mean, keep trying to put water on it and move the paint around and trying to get it to look more airbrushy. At some point, it looks terrible. So the idea with the watercolor is to kind of lay down a splotch of color, right? And then rinse your brush out really quick, and then hit the edges just with the water, just so it softens the edge a little bit. And then you take out a hair dryer, go over the watercolor really quickly, so that you just laid down dries almost instantly. Then you can lay another layer over the top of it, and it won't bleed together. Instead, it becomes these transparent layers that you're laying down over the top of one another, and you can get much better results. If I was a better painter, or I should say if I was a better painter, if I was a more experienced painter, I would do a video on it. But if I did a video on it, chances are I would screw it up, because I don't, as he said, forlorn and sadly, I don't paint that much because I don't have time. I'm doing black and white stuff, but I will say this, working with these markers like this is very much like watercolor. You kind of lay the color down fast, then you kind of blend over the top of it, then you lay it down. And so it does help. Working with these markers does help with your watercolor. And I shouldn't say I've started, because I've been doing it for years. I just haven't done a great volume of paintings, but combining acrylics with watercolors. What I tend to do is, like, if I'm doing flesh tones and stuff, I'll use watercolors because they're transparent and you can get more of the correct feel that I want, whereas acrylics are opaque and they're not oil paints. They don't work like oil paints because they don't really blend. You have to sort of yeah, they're a whole nother thing. But like, if I want something like, clothing or something that I don't want it to be transparent, then I can go in with acrylics and do that and get a kind of a look for it, and then keep my flesh tones watercolors, which are more transparent. So that's I wouldn't call it a technique, but that's an approach I've been using quite a bit, and actually fairly effective, I think. Or has been for me anyway. Okay, so Doom has stolen the cosmic power of the surfer. And we'll do some Kirby dots in here. Is that like the greatest thing? I mean, Kirby obviously created a lot of great things, but his, like, the way he did energy, I think everybody has stolen that. I mean, it's just become common language. in comics with those Kirby energy dots. Well, I have a hairdryer, but it's not for my head either. I bought one specifically for paint. So that's an interesting question. Well, here's the thing. My Wraith of God was originally supposed to be a 3 to 4 issue miniseries. And obviously trying to do it, you can't, the way crowdfunding is set up right now, it's almost impossible to do something like that, because the time it takes to raise the finances to do the book, then actually do the book, and then get it to the printer and blah, 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 you're talking months, right? So you couldn't do, I wouldn't want to do like 3 parts and stretch that over a year and a half. That just seems really lame. When it's, and I think it's more economical for you guys to be able to pay, you know, you get a 72 or an 80-page graphic novel for 25, 30 bucks, which isn't all that different than what you'd charge, Marvel or DC would charge you. Well, actually, it's probably about exactly what Marvel and DC would charge you if it was new material. The stuff they're producing is reprint material, generally speaking, in volumes that large. But it just seemed more logical to me to do it as a graphic novel. So there won't be, I mean, yeah, there's beats in the story that would have been, say, the end of an issue, right? So it's like be a cliffhanger or whatever. Will I actually separate it into chapters in the graphic novel? I might. I'm gonna have to take a look at it and see how it feels when I got it all done, and I can sit there and kind of look at it, you know, like with a book map, and say, okay, this needs to be, you know, there needs to be a chapter break here, or just, you know, can I just run it as one continuing story that just keeps on going? I don't know. It's a good question. You know, actually, Joe, I've done a video on my channel. If you go back and look through, I know there's 120 some videos there now, but most of them are live, and they're separated between live uploads and or live streams and then uploads, and they there's a lot less of the non-live videos, I guess you'd call them. I mean, they were live when I filmed them, I suppose, but so there is, most of the stuff that I originally did was not superhero, because we've always, you know, we've all heard you can't compete with DC and Marvel when it comes to superheroes, although I don't believe that anymore, because I don't think that they're doing a good job with their superhero titles right now anyway. So but I have quite a mix. I have there's fantasy stuff in there, there's adventure stuff, there's and then there's also this whole superhero thing. That seems to me like the more logical next step after I do Wraith of God, because Wraith of God actually does tie in to the rest of the universe, but it kind of like starts with him, because obviously You know, it's like when Wolverine, you know, is the oldest character in the Marvel universe, right? Because he was, you know, was he alive in the Civil War or whatever? I mean, I can't remember how far back they took him, but Wraith of God would be like the first superhero in this line of superheroes because he's, you know, from 1883, and it does sort of tie in. So to what's going on in Garbage Man, you wouldn't be able to. What I'm thinking of doing is adding an epilogue to Wraith of God, which maybe I'll do that as a stretch goal, to add this epilogue to it that kind of explains how Wraith of God sort of ties in. So yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff, some cool stuff that I want to do. And you know, like I said, you can sit and talk about it till you're blue in the face, but you actually at some point have to be willing to just kind of jump in and go for it. And that's what I'm doing finally. If I sat there and, you know, I'm serious, if I did 2 covers, penciled, inked, and colored them and pasted them up, I'm serious. I've got some green pens, but I don't trust them because they're old and I don't have any refills. So if I get, well, it appears to be behaving. So let's see if I've got enough green. If I get run out of green before I'm done, I'm going to be in trouble. And again, I know this looks gray to you on the monitor. But it's green. You can kind of get a hint of the green, but it's much greener than that. So I'm going to do a combination of marker and colored pencil, unless this ink holds up, and it feels like it's pretty full. But I know as soon as I start doing broad strokes, it's going to start squeaking, and I'm going to be like, oh. I'm not sure I know who Amelia Clark is, so I'm not going to give you anything on that. Thank you, Bert. Appreciate it. Thanks for dropping in, Micra. Appreciate it. We talk about this kind of stuff, but it's I think it's possible, but everybody's kind of got their own oh, actually, you know what I forgot to do? Okay. Now let's go back to the question. Have the professionals ever talked about crossovers of your books? Those are conversations. I think everybody has to sort of get their initial runs out of their system before they'd even like sort of consider that. I think it's advantageous because the problem is everybody's got their own universe to a certain degree, right? And, you know, to expect you guys to support, you know, 20 different books that are all, you know, $25 a piece or something. Now, granted, they don't come out every month, but I think it would be, you know, very advantageous for us to sort of, you know, somebody like Ethan Van Sciver, obviously he doesn't need to do that. He's doing quite well with just Cyberfrog. But I think it would be advantageous for the rest of us to kind of create that sort of connected universe kind of thing, so that it's not just, you know, every man for himself necessarily, but that you guys feel like when you're buying one of Graham's books, it's in the same family as, say, my books or Art's books or Dan's books or Andy's books, you know. But to be honest with you, I don't know how much interest everybody has right now in that, because I brought it up to some people, and I think we're going to have to wait and see how the landscape evolves, and then kind of go for what maybe we need to do. Sort of things make things work better, and I'm not sure that everybody really knows the answer to that yet. Ethan would probably say he knows the answer to it because he's, you know, and then you know, the guy who gosh darn it, who's doing Bigfoot Bill and Earthworm Jim, and he's got really huge numbers on his projects too. But you look at, you know, Mitch Breitweister went ahead and formed his own company, and that's kind of a different thing. So it's just, who was I talking to? I guess it was Dan DiDio recently, and he had made the comment that it's sort of like, how did he put it? This new sort of found indie market is sort of like, we're kind of right in the gold rush period, or the Wild West period right now, where anything goes and everybody's trying to kind of figure out. I mean, we think we have a pretty good idea of how it's going to work, but we don't really long term. You know, all this stuff is very sort of, you know, a couple projects here and there, and it's very we don't have a large sample size in terms of, you know, how long this has been going on, to can it sustain itself, you know, and all these different things, and will combining forces actually help or hinder? You know, I know Mike Miller's doing, they've got a crossover thing with Nexus and Bigfoot Bill, and I assume Lone Star and some other characters in there. You know, and that seemed like a pretty cool thing. So I think a lot of guys are very agreeable to that idea, you know, because everybody just, all they really want to do is make sure that their characters are presented correctly, or represented correctly, excuse me. And they want to make sure that they're maintaining ownership of their properties. And as long as all that criteria, those two criteria are met, I don't see why anybody would have a problem. But, you know, you launch something that's brand new and you've done like one issue or two, you know, two stories, and then you cross it over, and does that mean someone else is writing your character all of a sudden? Or, you know, it's a lot easier when you, excuse me, it's a lot easier when you develop a team project together. Like when I was in Studiosaurus back in the 90s, right? And we did Chicks. And those of you who aren't familiar with that can look that up online, CHIX. We did it through Image. And it was me, Terry Dotson, Ron Randall, Carl Kiesel. I take it back. Carl inked the cover, but he was too busy with Superman and stuff, or Superboy and stuff like that at the time. But it was me, Terry, Matt Haley, Ron Randall, and Adam Warren did the first issue, and then it was we got Gary Martin and Randy Emberlin involved in the second issue, along with guest artists Paul Ryan and Hilary Barda, for the Chicks That Time Forgot, which was the second thing. But the point of it was that we all sort of developed these characters, right? They were all part of this Chicks you know, there's my little quote fingers, chicks universe. And so we all had our own characters, and we would write our own characters, and it was kind of like we'd sit down and discuss, you know, the story arc. And it was a humor story, so it was pretty loose. And then we would, you know, I'd say, okay, I'll start and I'll do this first story arc, and I can do whatever I want, but it ends up here, and then you jump in and take over. And, you know, we knew where the thing was going. And no one was really stepping on anybody's toes because everybody was kind of just doing their own thing as long as it fit within the context of the overall framework. You know, Star Wars would be an example of doing that incorrectly, where Marvel would be an example, movies, I mean, of doing it correctly. It's kind of like you figure out where your beginning and your ending is, and then you can do whatever you want in the middle as long as you get to that point where it needs to be for the next person to take over. And that worked pretty well. You see my marker is beginning to tell me that it's getting a little dry. But I got this sucker covered, and was the main thing. And so I'll get another one in here. See, I don't like these texture lines in here unless they feel like they're supposed to be there. So that's what I'm trying to do, is kind of get a uniform flow of lines here that creates kind of a pattern. And then it sort of looks like, it doesn't just look like splotchy, bad marker work, but it looks like, you know, that was actually what you were attempting to do, which clearly I am attempting to do it because I'm doing it. But it's, you know, markers can get splotchy. I mean, that's when you cover these big areas like this. And so I choose to kind of try and lay down a pattern so that it feels textured and correct and doesn't feel just like randomly splotchy. See, this one's going in the garbage because it's out of ink. Now let's see what this one's got left. Can he bring me home? Is there enough in here to get me home? Let's see. I can also go over this with colored pencil, which I'm going to do to sort of define that texture a little bit better than I want on here. He's still got some juice left in it. You guys are going to be, I always say this, but it's true every time I do one of these, the color just for some reason does not reproduce well from my camera. Some of the greens and blues are very inaccurate. And so this looks very gray, but it's very green, actually. Okay, so there's some, you can tell there's still a little bit of spottiness and stuff in here. And I'm going to go over this now with colored pencil to sort of soften that a bit and get more of a, dare I say, a rhythm to the texture. And see, this is one of the things where, you know, we're talking about with a painting or something like that, is you start looking at it and going, ugh, I don't like the way that looks. You know, so then it's like, I've ruined it, I'm going to throw it out. No, you just continue to work it and get it where you want it and understand that there's other ways to get there. And that's exactly what I'm doing right now. Because ideally, you'd want this to be completely flat, an even coat, so it just looked, perfect. And you'd have some highlights, some lighter sections and highlights. But the markers are, they don't necessarily lay that smoothly. I mean, they don't. So you got to work them and get them to where you want them. Okay, so now I'm creating a line work across here like this, and then I'm going to go back over the top of that, the other direction, and sort of crosshatch this, right? And what it's going to do is it's going to create a texture, a pattern that's consistent. And so it'll help, won't completely eliminate, but it'll really sort of soften the effect of the splotchiness that was there in the markers. And I just keep cross-hatching this. And it gives me the look that I want. Now I need my, the heck is my, there it is. My tissue or my paper towel. So I'll go over this. And it won't completely eliminate the crosshatch, but it's going to, again, go ahead and soften everything. See, it picks up here. Bill, Wraith of God isn't available. It's going to be a crowdfunding project it's going up. At least the pre-launch page is going up this week, and so you have to tune in to find out more information. But it's not going to go live till early August. David Williams is in the house. Welcome, David. Glad you could make it. Again, cross-hatching over the top. I could have done this just from the beginning and just sort of like bagged the whole marker thing, but to get the green where I need it to be, cross-hatching, it would take a lot of time. Time is a luxury that I don't have. Of course, that's Khan from Wrath of Khan. Time is a luxury you don't have, Admiral. Sorry, can't help myself. Whenever I can quote Wrath of Khan, I'm going to do it. Now, David Williams is getting ready to start work on his creator-owned project as well. So there's a lot of us kind of moving in that direction. I think partly out of necessity, but partly out of, you get to a certain point. Like, I've been drawing comics for darn near 30 years. And, what have I got to show for it? I mean, yeah, I've made a living, but, I've been working on everybody else's characters for the most part. I mean, I have done Power Cubed and Garbage Man. So I do have a few things out there that I own or created. But, as a kid, even as a kid, you sit there and you've created all these characters and you had all these ideas. Oh, I'm going to do this someday. I'm going to do that someday. And you finally get into the industry, and then you spend, most of your life working on other people's properties, and really yours never seeing the light of day. And now, granted, a lot of creators don't have a bunch of different character ideas. They have one or two that they really sort of love, and then they kind of put all their energy into that. And I've never been that way. I've always had like a million ideas, right? And that's not to say everybody has doesn't have a million ideas, and it's not to say that just because I have a million ideas are all good. But one thing I've discovered is that it's not always, is the idea good or not? It's in the execution of the idea that really makes it good or not. And prime example was, this is when I kind of learned this. I was in film school down at USC, and Star Trek 4 was coming out, and that's the one with the whales. And I thought that was the stupidest idea I'd ever heard in my life. I was like, this is dumb. Whose idea was this? But then the movie came out, and it was the biggest moneymaker of all the Star Trek films. And it was pretty darn good. Now, granted, it was no Wrath of Khan, but hey, what is? But it made me realize that, you know what? It isn't necessarily, does the concept sound like, oh boy, that's great, or that's stupid, or whatever. It's in the execution of the concept, right? I mean, yeah, some concepts are just dumb, and they're never going to get off the ground because they're sort of ignoring the wants and desires of the audience. It's like if you're trying to push something on people just because you want it without having an understanding of what they might want as a buying, as buyers. You've got to be aware of that. You can't be completely stupid. But in the case of the Star Trek thing, I mean, they had the franchise, right? People want to see Star Trek, but you just looked at it and went, okay, that's a silly concept, but the story, but it wasn't, because they pulled it off. They made it work. And it's like me doing a Western. Is that dangerous? I suppose it is, but I tried to, hedge my bets a little bit by saying, well, yeah, it's a Western, but it's a superhero Western, so it's like, and it's got monsters in it. So, there's a wide variety of subject matter in there that hopefully will appeal to, different people. So it's not just a Western. It's not just a horror book. It's not just a superhero book. It has elements of all those things. So hopefully it'll work out. Time will tell. And boy, isn't that the truth. So you start putting some other stuff in there and it starts, you know, all that sort of messy green in there that you thought, God, I don't like the way that looks. Well, now it doesn't really matter because you're not even really seeing it anymore because you're bringing in other elements into it. I'm going to bring in some this is warm 4 because the warm leans towards the yellow, which is sort of in the wheelhouse of the green because we know you get green by mixing yellow and blue. So that's going to go in there and it's actually going to work all right. And suddenly the piece that you weren't sure if it was going to work or not started to come together. Okay, so like I said, we're going to finish off Doom, and then I'll go and make the Silver Surfer work. Let's see. David, no, it isn't the tin. Or the Wiz. No, yeah, I'm not even going to give you one. Boo! Let's see. Man, you are so right. You know, it's when I talk about Star Trek, it makes me think of Aaron. What a good time we had. That was a great weekend. Yeah, hours would seem like minutes. Nipsey Russell reference. Oh my gosh. Are you... Oh my goodness, that's funny. There you go. Working on OPP, other people's properties. Exactly. Exactly. Look at that. We got some Star Trek 2 fans in here. And you know, it makes sense. If you're a comic book fan, you should be a Star Trek fan.
Logical.
Yeah, I think it is logical. Don't ever, ever, ever disrespect Star Trek. Just don't do it. Aaron was down with OPP. Yeah, other people's properties. I like it. You know, that's true right there because he was supposed to be green, and then they couldn't get the printing color right, and he kept coming out gray, so they just, you know, so they changed him to gray anyway. Look at this is what Dave has. He's calling all of us nerds because we're Star Trek fans, even though he's the biggest Schneider honk, Justice League honk. So I don't know. He's pretty much a nerd himself, I think. I agree with that. There's a great little short video that Nicholas Meyer did on Star Trek 2 and about how he, was able to get a performance out of Shatner in Star Trek 2 because he was so, according to Meyer, was so, so protective of Kirk, and that he was Kirk kind of thing, and only he really understood Kirk and all that kind of crap. And so he was, he wasn't really acting. He was doing Kirk, or doing himself doing Kirk, or whatever, however Shatner looked at it. And what he said he would do was he would make Shatner do takes over and over and over and over again until he got bored. And he said, and then when he got bored, he actually sort of toned it down and sort of gave a performance. And I thought that was really interesting, because the great line in one of the great lines in Star Trek 2 is when they're facing off, Khan's secretly attacked them, and he wants them to send over the Genesis stuff. And then, Khan finally says to him, "Time's up, Admiral." And then Kirk goes, "Here it comes." Right? And he said Shatner read that line like, "Here it comes," and you're like, okay, well, then I guess maybe Khan probably figures he's up to something. So I guess he had to do that line over and over and over again. And, he wouldn't just say, "Oh, that blows, do it over." He would say, "Oh, I think we screwed up the sound. Can you do it again?" Or, "Oh, someone wasn't standing in the right position over. Can we do that again?" And he kept making him do it over and over again. And then finally you get, Kirk or Shatner reads the line the way it needs to be read, which is, "Here it comes," And so I just thought that was really sort of interesting. But he did, when Star Trek 5, he was terrible because he was directing himself. And then, and I don't know that, that Nimoy got the best out of him either when Nimoy was directing him. But Nicholas Meyer did. And I like Shatner. I mean, don't get me wrong. Obviously, I'm a Star Trek fan, but I think everybody, after a while, I mean, they say the same thing about Jack Nicholson. They say it about Al Pacino. And these are guys who are, more accomplished actors than Shatner, I think. But that after a while, they just start doing parodies of themselves. I mean, De Niro's doing it now, and you start to they lose that whatever that I guess it's like a comic book artist. You get in a certain style, and everybody expects that style, so you never leave that style, right? And I think you have actors that do the same thing. Guys like Johnny Depp or somebody like that. Maybe Brando, people like that. They didn't do that. They always give you what the character, needs, or at least as they interpret what the character needs. And it's not necessarily always the same thing, but you get to a point with Pacino and De Niro and these guys, and they're all great actors, of course, obviously, but where they just sort of are kind of just doing themselves. They're not really exploring or separating themselves from the character, I guess, maybe. And so they have their shtick that they do, and I suppose it's like anything else. It's like, again, as a comic book artist, we'll get a job and go, "Wow, I really want to do this," and really kind of pour yourself into it because it's really, really inspires you. But then there's, in between, there's a couple other jobs that you're not all that thrilled with, and you just kind of, you do a professional job, but you don't really push yourself. It's probably the same thing, I would guess, with actors. You do that many films. I mean, that's just. because unfortunately you're not always getting stuff that inspires you. You're not always getting, you know, something that really challenges you. So you end up taking jobs because you got bills to pay, and that's as a comic book artist or as a actor. I think maybe directing can be a little bit different because usually you're not, doing huge numbers of films as a director, so each project you kind of can take a look at and see if it's something you really want to do. But sometimes you don't have any options. Something comes along, you're like, okay, this movie sucks, but I need to get a directing credit, or I need some work, so I'm going to take it. But I still think there's so much work that goes into directing, that most guys, I would hope, would take what directing jobs they get pretty seriously. But I think this is humming along quite nicely. Thank you very much. My goal was to get this done in 2 hours. I might meet that goal. It's going to be tight, though. It's going to be very, very close. Okay, so what I have to do, well, I got to fill in the blacks first, because I do have a little bit of black. This probably needs to be blacked in. This kind of the view of his skirt, I'm sorry, his tunic from the back side, because it's kind of blending in with his cape behind him, and that'll give us a little bit of separation there, like that. And then, of course, underneath his cowl, is that what we call it? His hood. Thankfully, I don't have huge areas of black to fill in on this, because this black is going south on me, and I don't want to refill it. That's an excellent question. Is there a female equivalent to William Shatner or Al Pacino? I don't know, because you look at somebody like Meryl Streep, and I don't know that Meryl Streep ever really phones it in. I mean, she's taken some movie roles that weren't, great, but it's hard to think of a female actress that just has a shtick that she does, Okay. Okay, now I want to, do we know what color Doom's eyes are? I honestly don't know. Now, these I've never used before, but I'm using them now. This is a Prismacolor Premier pen. Of course, I've done all of my marker work over the top of this mostly, so it's, if they do bleed, they're not going to have anything to bleed because I'm not going to use any marker over them. Let's zoom in here a little bit. I just want to get whatever's going on in his mouth, this mechanical stuff in here, to be darker. Okay. So we say Doom's eyes are green, huh? Alrighty, I believe you. Go with his cape. I'm going to sharpen this up. You can kind of get a sense of the green right there. But no, not really. It's so green compared to what you guys are seeing. I'll show it on the other camera before I tap out. And that's a 0.3. I have to go in with a little bit of flesh tone in here because there's just a little bit. You're not going to be able to see it here, but there's a little bit of, you can see it in his eyes what I went in and did in there because you can see it underneath through his eye holes that there is a little bit of flesh in there. So we have to indicate that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do the surfer now, and then I will go in and do highlights and do some little more line work over the top of Doom here. But Surfer, of course, is not in great shape because Doom just took his powers. See, I don't know. This is the kind of stuff I liked when I was, I mean, granted, I was a kid, so, you know, your taste change as you get older, but I still love this sort of kind of over-the-top heroes and villains type stuff. I don't know, it seems like there's, I guess our tastes expand as we get older in terms of what, you know, we'd like to see in comics in terms of subject matter, or I can't even, so you can see there's some light gray going in there. In terms of subject matter and stuff, but I do kind of miss the old melodrama of superhero comics. Sort of the grand adventure. Everything today, not everything, but a lot of things seem sort of grounded in too much reality for me. Oops, sorry. I've said many times on this stream and other streams is I got plenty of reality in day-to-day life. I don't want to read it in my comics. I want to be taken away someplace that is just like I've never seen before or could only imagine. It's kind of the fun stuff, I think. Although, you know, I did like Killing Joke a lot, even though it was incredibly grim. have to admit that, and I think I have said so on this show, is that it was Boland's artwork that made it incredibly special for me. Even though the story was really good, if Boland hadn't drawn that, if it had been somebody of lesser ability, or in some cases considerably lesser ability, I don't know that I would have picked it up. It's so hard. And I mean, it's because I'm an artist, obviously, but it's hard for me to, again, I don't want to mention any specific titles because I don't want to, basically suggest that one of my contemporaries is not a good artist. But, there were certain books that were very popular that I could not get into. I didn't, because the writer was really hot or whatever, and everybody's like, oh, you got to read this, it's really cool. But the art, I just didn't do anything for me. And as a result, I wouldn't pick the book up. There seems to be a lot of artists getting, pissy, I guess, for lack of a better word, because writers are getting so much credit, and artists are kind of getting shoveled to the side. And I don't really worry about that stuff that much, but it is, for me, the art's got to be there, man. If the art isn't there, then I don't give a rip how good the story is. I'm not going to read it. And a lot of people are, they're sort of in love with the writers right now, and to a point that they don't give a rip who draws it. And a lot of times a really good, well-written story will make an artist seem better than he actually is, too. I mean, I've seen that happen a lot. But you really don't see an artist carrying a title like they used to be able to. And I think that's largely by design, by the companies, after Image. They made sure that they never got into a situation where these artists were controlling the old saying that the inmates were running the asylum, which is why they won't let an artist stay on a book very long. You're on it for a year or a year and a half, you move on to another project. And I think they're doing the same thing with writers to a certain degree, but I mean, let's face it, it's either a writer's market or an artist market. It has to be one of those all the time is getting attention, and oftentimes more than they deserve. But, if people are enamored with writers, and that means artists are going to suffer. If people are enamored with artists like they were during the Image days, then writers are going to suffer and get the short end of the stick. And I remember a lot of writers kind of being pissed during that period of time that they weren't getting their due. And now it's come back the other way again, where writers are getting all the credit and artists are not necessarily always getting their due. So, and it's an interesting topic of discussion, about creating a character. is an artist really a co-creator, or is he a designer of the character? And you could argue that the design, is part of the creation of it, and it is, but I mean, in some cases, like you look at Spider-Man, that was that was just an inspired design, an iconic design. Most characters have their costume changed regularly depending on who the artist is. So then the design does not become as important to the creation of the character, So I mean, I'm not suggesting that writers should get all the credit for creating characters. I'm not. I'm just simply throwing the question out. How do you define, who created a character? Is it in the concept, or is it in the execution of the concept? And that was kind of Stan Lee's point was, hey, yeah, I didn't design these characters, but like Spider-Man, for example, he came up with the concept, and how detailed that concept was, I don't know, but he comes up with a concept, calls up Ditko, and so then Ditko, takes Stan's concept and makes a really cool costume, and then starts basically writing his own stories, but the concept was actually Stan's. So I don't really know what the point is I'm trying to make here. I just find it interesting that there's, and I think it's best that people do share, because let's face it, if you're a writer and you're not a novelist, right, then in comics you need an artist to bring your concept to life. And it's the same thing with, like, people being pissed off at publishers for taking all the money or whatever. Well, if the publisher wasn't there to publish your comic would be sitting in your file drawer. So you have to understand how, it's one thing, I'm not in agreement, obviously, with, say, Marvel exploiting the heck out of characters that other people created, making billions of dollars off of them and not sharing some of that money with the guys. But we also have to understand that without the corporate overlord that pays for everything, none of this stuff gets done. So it's a very interesting dynamic that is not easily solved, I don't think, to anybody's satisfaction. It just depends on which side of the fence you happen to be on. If you're an artist, obviously you're going to support the artist's point of view, but I try to not do that. I try to look at the reality, and say, okay, yeah, this would benefit me most, but what's really right here? And try to look at things that way. And as a result, I've never really had issue with publishers or, certain artists making more money than me or something like that. Because if they're looking at analytical numbers and saying, well, so-and-so, every time we put his art on the cover, it sells more copies, but it's kind of hard to argue, well, I don't care, I should still get paid just as much. Well, not really, because all this stuff is market driven, right? It's driven by you guys who are the readers. And if you happen to like somebody's artwork more, if you're going to go out and buy a cover that Adam Hughes does, but you're not going to buy everything I do, but you're going to buy everything Adam does, well, that tells them that people like Adam more than they like me. And so therefore Adam should get paid more than I do, because he's selling more books than I am. So again, all that to say simply that there's a lot of factors involved in all this stuff that goes to determining this stuff. And I don't think anything is necessarily just cut and dry, black and white, so to speak. Johnny, it is Doom and the Surfer. It is. It looks cool. Thank you. Well, I went on a diatribe and lost all my viewers. Only got a few people left. How about that? It's true. I mean, it is. I'm not talking about necessarily the importance of, you know, selling a book. That's all visual. Okay, that all is on the artist, because you guys aren't going to pick up something that you don't like the looks of. You're not even going to read it if you don't like the looks of it, right? So, you know, the art has to be there to get someone to buy the book. But once it's, you know, once you're hooked and are reading it, then it becomes, you know, the writer becomes more important, because they're the one that's, once you've accepted the artwork and you've got in the door because you like the art, well, now that story had better be good to keep you coming back. So they really, I mean, you can't, you're right, you can't, in this medium, it's both. It always is both. And which one is more important depends on who you talk to. Gosh darn it, sorry. Again, the issue with these 11x17 things is keeping everything on camera. Doom always wins. I'm not a huge Lex Luthor fan, but, you know, I mean, he's a guy with some money and some power and can get stuff done. But Doom is, you know, and just in terms of comic books, Doom has to be the greatest villain of all time, doesn't he? And simply because of his, you know, of that fact, he's not a guy that you could have lose. I mean, except he loses to the hero, of course, but not to another villain. And I don't see that. But it always comes down to the same thing as, like, you know, Simonson said to me, is that all depends on who's writing the story, right? And what their motivations are and everything else. All right, I think that looks pretty good, actually. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, if I can find an 8 that's halfway decent, I'm going to go ahead and beef up these black lines and finish this up. As we are 6 minutes to the 2-hour mark. I'm not going to get out of here exactly at 2 hours, but it's going to be close. So I'm just going to go ahead and go over these lines, especially the green. Green's the value, the dark green is a very dark value. Obviously, that's why it looks so dark. And so it overpowers the line work a little bit. funny. You'll talk to most artists and they'll tell you that, like their family members, they appreciate the fact that you can draw or you do whatever you do, right? But it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal to them, because they're used to it, I guess, you know. But then when your son, and my son is 28, he's not a little kid anymore, comes to you and asks for a piece, as a present, that's when oh, he does appreciate what I do. That's pretty cool. But it's funny, he was never the comic book fan that I was growing up, but he was into it, for a while. But he started reading the Marvel Essentials and has really become more of a fan of the classic stuff, like me. I mean, that was the stuff I grew up reading, and now he's, he was born in the 90s, so, he basically grew up in the 2000s. So, reading New Avengers was like, that was the cool thing. But when he goes back and actually takes a look at the Silver Age and where all this stuff actually started at, he's really become quite a fan of the older stuff. And admittedly, we joke about this all the time, when Marvel first kicked off in the the early 60s, the early issues of a lot of those books were not great. I mean, you could clearly see they were trying to figure out what they were doing and what they wanted to do with the characters and everything else. But once they kicked into gear, like, I don't know, probably FF, really the late 30s, early 40s. I mean, issue numbers I'm talking here. That's when that stuff really started getting consistently good. And you can just see the difference in the quality of the stories and even the art. It's kind of like Kirby sort of figuring out what the thing should look like, and it really sort of evolved and became the look that we know now, instead of that sort of lumpy, when he finally defined the brow and his face and how he's going to do all the rocks on him, so that there was sort of a uniform look to him, that I guess, which became his iconic look that we all sort of know and understand is the thing. In Spider-Man, I don't think, and I'm not as big as, I'm much prefer Romita's Spider-Man to Ditko's. And I know that's sacrilege to most, people who really are into the older, stuff, especially the people that grew up on Ditko's version. But just from an artistic standpoint, I just much preferred Romita. And to me, it was Romita that sort of defined the modern look of Spider-Man, not Ditko. Not that I don't minimize what Ditko did at all, but I just saying I prefer Romita. Even though some people argue that Romita made him too thick, too muscular. You could argue that's true. But see, I'm also a bigger Buscema fan than I am of Kirby. Although, clearly Buscema patterned his storytelling and dynamics off of Kirby, like most guys did. But just as a, not necessarily as a creative force, but just as a draftsman, I much preferred Buscema's style to Kirby's. But I will say this, I always really enjoyed Kirby's Thor for some reason. That always really worked well for me. Even the times when Coletta was inking him, which was not my favorite, believe me. But I think our memories of our youth are sort of fuel our favorite artists, right? I mean, I grew up reading Spider-Man, and Ross Andru was the artist. And I didn't love Andrew, but I thought it was fine. And then once I started reading Spider-Man, I went back and started buying back issues so I could, get everything that happened before then. And that's where I sort of fell in love with Romita and said, yeah, this is, I really like this look. But then I'm much more of a traditionalist art style wise. So, and Ditko clearly was, and even Kirby to a certain extent, were visionaries in terms of, they weren't doing things the way everybody else was doing things. And see, I will put a little bit of line work in here. And guys like Romita and John Buscema, they were more classic artists. They drew stuff the way that it was supposed to look, or that we imagined that it should look. And so therefore we, those of us who dug those guys, really, those were our favorite artists. Whereas people that maybe wanted something a little bit more unique or had a different flavor to it, or a little bit of an unusual quality to it, you've got Kirby or Ditko. But I didn't really get Kirby or Ditko as a kid. I just did not get what they were doing. They were guys that I learned to appreciate much later in life. But it's one thing to appreciate someone's art, and another thing to really like it. And my tastes haven't really changed. I mean, I'm still, like I said, a Buscema guy and Romita guy. Although, there were unique artists like Barry Smith or Bernie Wrightson or Stranko, guys that were not, although Stranko started off as, a Kirby clone, just as Barry Smith did, because that was kind of the house style. But when they kind of branched out and did their own thing, they were very unique in how they approached things. But I still dug what they were doing because that unique stuff, like other people, I would look at it and go, wow, I haven't seen that before. But then you take Neil Adams, and Neil Adams wasn't necessarily doing a whole lot of things new. He was just doing it really, really well. I mean, some of his storytelling stuff was out there and a very different, but it was just his drawing, not necessarily his storytelling, that kind of like with Buscema. Buscema never did anything, mind-altering with his storytelling, but his drawing was so good, and even though Neil Adams was doing cool stuff storytelling-wise, it was his artwork that I was, his drawing ability that I was responding to. Whereas Steranko, it was a combination of the weird stuff he was doing with his storytelling and the uniqueness of his approach to the art. Just sort of all worked for me, especially when I was younger. So I don't know what the moral of the story is. The moral of the story is I have wide taste like most of us do. I guess it depends on what you're in the mood for. So here we go. This is, see, now there was a period in there where we were looking at this going, I don't like how this is shaping up, but it came together. I'm going to put a little bit of some highlights here and there, even though there really wouldn't be necessarily reflective highlights on his green tunic. But it just kind of adds to it. A few dots here and there of white. Never hurt anybody. There's really no point in dropping highlights on the surfer that much because he's still pretty much white. So then I'm going to take my W3, that'd be my warm 3, and do my little halo effect. I'm going to assume that's a question for me. Boy, that's a good question. I do like Kirby's Doom. I'm kind of torn between Buscema and Kirby on Doom, but I'm going to go, you know what? I'm going to go with Kirby on that. Because I think when Kirby sort of came into his own there in the mid-60s, man, he really did some powerful stuff. And Doom was his baby, obviously, as a lot of the characters were. But once he got the thing down, and once he got, Buscema did a really good thing though too. But Kirby's thing was really good, and so was his and Doom. Because I think Kirby really, the reason I think I like Thor so much is because Kirby's style really lent itself to big, powerful characters. Larger than life. And I mean, all superheroes to a certain degree are larger than life, obviously, but you know, the big, like, you know, Ronan the Accuser, right? Or Galactus, you know, characters like that. I know I've got a a warm 3 someplace refill. Where the heck is it? It's a 1. I'm telling you, I just can't. My mom used to say, you just can't win for losing. I don't really know what that means, but I know I've got a W3. But see, the thing is, it's a little harder to track down those. There it is. These new refills, because they look like the pens, whereas the old refills look like, refills. So anyway, I'm going to go with Kirby, but it's close. Now, you guys may or may not know this, but I actually drew 2 different Dr. Doom stories early in my career. And so I'm actually my favorite Dr. Doom artist is me. I did the Impossible Man Summer Fun Special, which had a Dr. Doom story in it. And then, of course, I did that X-Men Dr. Doom annual, like it was 96 or 97, that old man Art T. Bear inked. And that had some pretty cool Doom stuff in it. But I was modeling my Dr. Doom after Kirby, I think, anyway. So, I mean, I can't say off the top of my head. Although, I did look at Wally Wood in, are you kidding me? I just lost the tip. What did I do with that tip? That's ridiculous. Oh, there it is. Blended in with the counter. If you look at Astonishing Tales, right, 70s series that had Kazar in it, and it started off with Dr. Doom in it too. And it was like they were separate stories, It's like Wally Wood did the Dr. Doom stories in there. And of course, Wally Wood was a terrific artist, but not a guy who did like really powerful work like Kirby or Buscema or Steranko. He did more, it was just well-drawn stuff. And so I was looking at that on the very first Doom job I did. So that might have had some inspiration, but I mean, ultimately, Kirby's Doom is just so much more powerful. And Buscema's, of course, was too, because he was patterning it after Kirby. But man, that's a long-winded response, isn't it? Yeah, it's funny. That is completely true. And I was aware of it to a certain extent because, of his Sally Forth and things like that, which was sort of, she was walking around nude, but there wasn't like sex or anything going on, at least none of the stuff I saw. Well, I bought that there's a hardcover, The Art of Wally Wood came out a while ago, and I bought it at the store and I went home, and some of the porn in there was so unexpected and raw. I was like, I took it back. I was like, I can't have this in my house. I mean, some of it was raunchy, and I'm not going to sit here and defend porn at any level because I won't do it. But there's stuff that is, not as offensive, and then there's stuff that's like really offensive. And some of the stuff he did was pretty offensive. It didn't necessarily change my opinion of it because I already knew about it, but I just didn't realize that some of the stuff he did, it was so hardcore. I can tell you this, I'll never look at Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs the same way again. Eesh. And that's unfortunate, true. I mean, that's the thing. You see something like that, and someone does like a porn parody or really something really gross or disgusting with something that is, you know, innocent and something from your youth or whatever, and then it kind of, you can't ever look at it the same way again. That's kind of unfortunate, really. I think this turned out, I'm sorry, I'm letting this go all over the place, but let me zoom out. I think this turned out pretty well, actually. Which, you know, I'm always grateful, because last thing I want to do is a live stream with some really crappy art on it. That would not be a good thing. But let me, this bothers me. Okay, these are the kind of things that bother me. See how this energy is going straight up? That's just too, too regimented. Too, like, I want that to kind of feel a little bit more unpredictable. I don't know if that helped. I mean, because you get that, you can't even see it. Ah, come on. Let's, there we go. To me, it's, you always want movement, and you know, if this just goes up straight up in like a pillar or something, then it, gosh darn it, this dang lighting in here. There, you know, if it just goes up kind of in this straight pillar, it really gets dull, and I don't like the way it looks. You know, it's like with capes and stuff. I've always seemed to have them moving, you know, or flowing in some way or shape or form. Still not 100% happy with the expand this out a little bit too. All right, that's much better. Okay, I'm going to switch cams here so you can look at my wonderful face again, but the color is actually better. Still not quite as green. Oops. Everything's opposite. It like drives me nuts because I always think I'm moving one way and it's moving the other. So there it is. There we go. I, of course, will scan this and post it after I actually give it to my son, because I don't want him to see it before I actually before I give it to him. You know, ruin the surprise, as it were. But anyway, there you have it. So we went, well, 2 hours and 20 minutes. I went a little over. What are you going to do? You guys, thanks so much for dropping in unexpectedly with me and going through this Dr. Doom journey. Oh, I want to address something here. I'm probably going to butcher your name, but I want to say Vianney Beck. Anyway, your package is being put together, your art and everything you got during AaronCon, and it will ship out tomorrow. So I apologize. Those of you guys that are still waiting for your art, I apologize. It's taking, which would seem like a long time, because it is. As I discussed earlier, that, you know, I've got like 40 packages to ship out. And so I'm spending X amount of hours a day packaging material, art, you know, books, whatever, prints, and then making a run to the post office. And then I draw the rest of the day, or do a live stream and draw and whatever, try to combine all these things. And then the next morning, get up, package some more stuff, send it out. So it's been a little bit of a process. It was, like I said, it was a very successful con, and I'm quite appreciative to you guys for everybody that helped out and bought some stuff. And thank you, Paul. Appreciate that. So I do appreciate you guys' patience, because it is, like I said, I don't have little elves back here like packaging stuff for me. I'm doing it myself. Anyway, it's getting out, and it'll all be out. I think I'm going to try and get the rest of it out, well, tomorrow. And well, it's probably not all going to be shipped out by Wednesday. That I can pretty much promise, unless something, you know, super drastic happens that comes down the pike that is unexpected. But I should have it all shipped out by Wednesday. Those of you guys waiting on sketchbooks, those are shipped out media mail. So a lot of them have already gone out, but they take a week to 10 days to get to you. So, you know, if you have artwork and a sketchbook, the artwork will show up days before the sketchbook will, because they're mailed separately. The Justice League prints come back from the printer tomorrow, so I'll start getting those packaged up and sent out on Wednesday. And so everything should be shipped and out by Friday of this week. That includes the Justice League prints, the limited edition Justice League prints. So there you go. I will come back on, maybe just for a short thing tomorrow, once I get the Wraith of God preview page up, so you guys will know about it, and I'll give you links and everything so you can go check it out. And other than that, I think we're done here. So everybody, thank you again for joining me. I appreciate it. Oh, and also, please, we are so close. We're over 900 subscribers. Like and subscribe. If you haven't liked and subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do that so we can get up over 1,000. Yeah, so I got to run that at least once per show. So, and I'll probably come on live before the professionals, which is Thursday night at 5 Eastern. Pardon me, 5 Pacific, 8 o'clock Eastern. That's always a fun time. And if you didn't watch last week's when I did the game show thing, you should check it out. It's archived in my YouTube channels. It's a pretty entertaining show. And then, of course, I'll be back Sunday at 5:30 for my regular big show, which we haven't had in 2 weeks. It'll be 2 weeks. So that's with all the extra features and all the stuff that I do for that I don't necessarily do for these last-minute live streams or last-second live streams. So anyway, thank you all. Enjoy your week until we cross paths again, which will hopefully be sooner than later. So anybody, take care and thank you.